Okay, welcome to our very first podcast for career hacking. We're hoping that this will be a good format that we can get more of the information out to help IT professionals in particular as they're trying to take control of their career, as they're trying to get more job opportunities, as they're trying to get more promotions, as they're trying to get higher salaries. My name is Jeff Baird, and I also have here Josh. I always massacre your last name though.
No worries, no worries. My name is Josh McCackney. I'm been in IT, 7 years as well. Excited. I love this stuff. I love the stuff that we're about to talk about today, and that will go through kind of further along in these podcasts. And I've used a bunch of it in my career, so excited to be here. Excited to be a part of it.
Cool. Happy to have you here, and happy to have anybody listening to this podcast. So I remember when I was a kid, my dad was a dentist. And one of the challenges he had owning his own business was trying to find good staff, in particular the front desk staff. They're kind of the first impression patients would have when they'd come into the office. Yeah. And finding somebody that could build a rapport with them, that could help them feel safe and comfortable, because it makes you nervous going to the dentist. And so trying to find somebody that was friendly and likable that they could build a rapport with was pretty difficult for them to find and staff for. And I remember as a little kid, we were at this restaurant as a family for dinner one night, and the waitress was amazing. She was authentically likable and warm, and instantly built a rapport with all of us. She was so good at it that at the end of the dinner, my dad ended up offering her a job on the spot to come work at his dental office. And she accepted and ended up working there. I don't know how long she worked there, maybe 15 years or so. Worked for my dad in his dental office, and was a great employee, great person that all the patients loved. And I didn't think too much of it at the time as just a kid, but as I look back on that experience now, with my experience, I've been in IT for almost 20 years now, and have gone through my own growing pains and my own process in my career. And to think of how that panned out, that she was just going through the normal workday, and then to have a job just land on her lap. And it wasn't luck. She had this certain something, this approach that attracted the opportunity to her, but she was just doing her thing. And she was doing it in an authentic way so that a job opportunity came to her. And I contrast that to how we typically look for jobs. I think of the process that I typically go through if I'm going to start looking for a job. What people often do is what? Go on a website, start looking on Indeed.com or Glassdoor and seeing what opportunities are available, right? But that's a very different dynamic. She didn't do anything to pursue a job. It came to her. I think that's really cool. It'd be cool to understand how that happens and see if we can leverage it in our own careers.
Jeff, I was going to say, I've heard this story a couple times now, and I've always really, really liked it. It's almost, to me, because I've never had like that specific situation happen to me, like it seems almost like a fairy tale, but I know actually tons of people who are just like, yeah, I met a friend of a friend, and we really hit it off. And he was like, I have, this job that you seem like you'd be really good at. So I think it does happen. And I think that I guess what you're saying, or like what we're going to talk about is basically putting yourself in situations where that type of thing can happen, where you can kind of be in your element or be showing your stuff and have other people recognize that. And so I think it's awesome. And not only that, I think it's possible for like everyone to do, and definitely favorable above, what I've done most of the time, which is like Glassdoor, like you said. It feels a lot better to be like, have someone recognize, that you're good at something and be like, hey, you interested in collaborating on something or doing something together or taking on this position.
Yeah, that's the ideal. And everything's a process. And there is no perfect formula, but the hacks that we're going to talk about in this podcast, the things we share in our online courses and in presentations that we do are all around trying to find these ways to get job opportunities coming to you instead of you having to chase them down. like I said, typically we do it through a website. I've been through this process myself, especially early in my career, where you're looking at 10 different jobs and you just apply for all of them, and you hope that you did a good enough job on your resume that you can land an interview. Yeah, and then if you manage to get the interview, you're sitting there in the interview room through a haze of anxiety as you're trying to persuade that person across the table from you, maybe even a group of people. Sometimes you get you get the gauntlet, right? And through that haze of anxiety, trying to persuade them and convince them that they should hire you. I've never liked that process. In fact, I remember one time in an interview where I really screwed up. I'd heard beforehand about the interviewer, that he liked to do tricky logic questions to try to trip you up and see how you do in an interview. And I got in my own head a little bit too much. I psyched myself out and got into the interview, and he asked some questions and I completely blew it. I don't remember what the one was. It was one of these problems.
I was going to say, what's the question?
I don't remember what it was. It was, there's ones like the sausage machine ones and things like that, these logic questions. And I don't even remember what it was, but in the moment, I couldn't figure it out to save my life, and completely bombed the interview. But then after the interview, once the cortisol and the adrenaline clears from your system, then it was obvious. And I realized how basic the answer was and how much I'd screwed up.
Yeah, I actually got one of those questions one time. I didn't get a job. I was interviewing for a manager over a business process improvement team, and I got a logic question about light bulbs. It was something weird, and I was so nervous. I actually had heard this question before, and I knew the answer, but I was so nervous that I sat there and second guessed myself for probably like 5 to 7 minutes, sitting in front of this director.
Yep.
Because of the same type of stuff that we're talking about. So I mean, definitely applicable.
It's frustrating, and there's actually a reason why your brain shuts down. Well, we could talk about that in a future podcast. But there's a neuroscience reason why you get that brain fog and why you can't answer and perform at the level that you want to in the interview.
Even if I know the answer, like I'm still.
Even if you know the answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I got tired of that process in my own career, and I realized too over time that there's better ways of doing it. That you don't have to go through the front door. That there's side door approaches. There's hacks that you can get to get these job opportunities, and that those are more effective. They tend to pay higher, and there's more of those side door opportunities if you know how to look for them. According to Forbes, they found that only 20% of jobs are publicly advertised. So if we're trying to go through this front door approach, we're only getting 20% of the job opportunities that are available. So if you go to Glassdoor, if you go to Indeed and you see 20 job openings there's 80 that you aren't seeing at all. Mm. And so if you're doing the standard approach of applying for a job anonymously, you're missing out on the 80% of the jobs. And so that begs the question too, who's getting those other jobs?
Yeah, this slide, when I first saw it, made me mad, like upset, because I'm like, okay, so I'm an IT professional, I'm a data guy. I'm like, I'm going to put myself out there. I think I'm good at what I do. But like, even all of that work, all that resume, tweaking and stuff like that, and applying for jobs, which is sometimes so tedious. Like it seems like hard work, at least to me. And then to see this and be like, okay, well, that's only reaching 20% of the 20% of the 100% that's out there, right? 20% of the jobs that are actually out there. And I'm like, this sucks. I'm super about this,
Just adds to the frustration. You're leaving all those opportunities on the table.
Yeah. So I was super upset to see this, but I mean, it's vital. It's vital to know this, because this is what allows you to change that, change that loop that we're constantly in looking for jobs, right? Especially in IT where, the market is incredibly hot right now. And it's like, okay, if you really want to take advantage of this, you have to do it in the right way. You need to know this.
Right. It's a great opportunity to get a boost in your salary and find a really solid position, since it is a candidate's market. But what can add to this frustration too is that not only 20% of the jobs are advertised, but of those 20%, only 20% of those get interviews. Yeah. So you can spend all that time on a resume and have a stellar resume, and it might just get filtered out by the applicant tracking system. It might get thrown out because of the recruiter's bias. All sorts of things can happen. So only 20% of that 20% even get an interview. And then obviously some small subset of that, oftentimes just one person from that pool ends up actually getting the offer.
Yeah.
So it's probably still a necessary part. Like, I wouldn't say that you don't apply for jobs through the front door, but we want to also, we want to tackle this whole pie. We want to be able to take advantage of all the opportunities that we can.
Yeah.
And so throughout these podcasts, we'll touch on things with the 20%, because that is relevant. We want to have a good resume. We want to have good interview strategies, but we want to focus a lot on that 80%. I remember when I was in high school, my physics teacher tried to teach us this principle on quantifying things and making sure that we're putting in effort where it's going to have the most good. And he used this analogy with us once, told of this guy that had a really high heating bill. And he figured he was losing heat in the winter through his windows or his attic or through his doors or whatever was happening. And so his goal was he wanted to lower the heating bill. He goes to Home Depot, and they have these windows, these energy efficient windows that will cut down heat loss by 80%. He's like, this is cool. I'll put these in and I will save money. So he buys them, takes them home, installs them, and waits for a few months to watch what happens with his bill. And his bill goes down just a teeny bit, but it's still really high. And he's like, why is this? I put in better windows.
Yeah.
Well, come to find out, 80% of his heat loss was out his roof.
Yeah.
And only 20% was out the windows. So he did get improvement. He spent a lot of time, money, effort on that 20%, but only negligible improvement on what actually mattered on his actual bill. Whereas if he'd focused on the heat loss on his, going out through the attic, he would have been able to have a lot better return on his investment for his time and his money. So that's where I want to focus most of the time in this material. So today we aren't going to get into it too much. This is mostly an introduction, but let's talk about that 80%. Who's getting the jobs in those 80%? It's the people that are either internal hires and or people that they know, somebody in their network. And so the secret sauce of career hacking, what really helps you get the 80% is to have a solid, well-established network. But it's not just enough to know people, because we all know people that we would never hire.
I know lots of people that aren't going to be good for jobs, right? Like and that almost makes it, I don't know if this is where you're going, but that almost makes it like necessary to know even more people, right? Because there's a lot of people that you're going to know that just aren't going to have opportunities that fit your skill set, right? That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and there's going to be two aspects to it. Just the sheer numbers is going to help. And then there's characteristics that we want them to see in us. Like as if you think of somebody in your life that you wouldn't hire if you had a need that you were trying to solve for a company.
Got it.
You know, why would you not hire them? What are some of the reasons?
They don't have the skill set. They don't have a good like track history of like I guess sticking, with a job. I mean, there's countless reasons, right? But I think, those are two of the major ones, right? I don't trust that they're going to put the right effort into the job, or they don't have the skill set for that specific job. Exactly.
So a couple things that you mentioned, the skill set and the trust. Yeah. Those are key attributes that I'll touch on a little today, and will come up throughout additional podcasts. People need to know that we can do the job. They have to see that we are competent, that we have, like you said, we have the skills. If they don't see us as competent in our trade, then they're not going to be a good referral. They're not a source of opportunities. They have to see us as confident and competent. And there's an element of likability here. If you don't like the person, you're probably not going to hire him either. Or if you don't trust them.
That's true. Even if they're right, even if they're great, but like they're not likable. Like I don't want to work with you every day. Then that, you know, amazingly smart people get passed up all the time because they're not a fit for the team, right?
Exactly. I was watching a couple of weekends ago, Imitation Game. Have you seen that?
Yep, love it, love it.
And I don't know how much of it's historically accurate, but for those that don't know, it's the story of Alan Turing when he was trying to build a machine that could crack the Nazi encryption program Enigma. And so he built this machine that could do it. And I don't know how accurate it is, but in the movie, at least, they portrayed him as terrible, terrible people skills. He was incredibly competent, incredibly intelligent. He knew exactly what needed to happen to be able to solve the problem, but nobody liked him. And that was a huge obstacle to him getting anything done. He kept getting in fights or almost getting fired. And it was this whole thing, just the likability factor. And so the secret sauce is to build out this network, but the secret ingredients, the things that we're going to talk about as part of these hacks are the people skills, the social skills, so that as we're building out this network, they see us as competent and they see us as a good cultural fit, or pick whatever phrase you want. If they see us as likable and see us as competent, then when needs come up, you're more likely to come to their mind and they're more likely to reach out to you. And just like the waitress at the beginning of my story, that's how you get opportunities coming to you, is people seeing you in that light, then they'll reach out to you.
Yeah, and that's one thing I wanted to bring up here, and you're probably going to get into it if I remember right, but like those relationships don't have to be deep, right? It's like your dad hired that waitress that he met that day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that you've known for, you know, years. Like, oh yeah, I met this guy in college and now he's, you know, in some high up position and he can help me out. You know, he can get me into this other position. That's not necessarily how it works all the time. And I'm sure you're going to get into that, but I just wanted to highlight that because that's a big piece to me. Like almost a deterrent, right? Like I haven't done this in the past. So like, how hard is it going to be to develop these, you know, significant relationships that are going to help me? But that's not always how it happens.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I don't want to send this idea that you have to have close personal relationships with everybody, because that's not feasible. Yeah. And it's not necessary. I don't have the slide here, but in another study, they found that most of the job opportunities that people get are from what they call weak ties. It was 56% of the jobs come from weak ties. So these are acquaintances that people have. And then it was only 17% that they called strong ties, close personal relationships. And then the remainder of the job opportunities came from zero ties. Those are the cold contacting ones. And so in those numbers, you still see that 73% still came from people that you know. That's still more effective than cold contacting and going to the front door. But of that, who you know, you don't have to have those close personal relationships. It's the acquaintances, it's the circles that you have. And hopefully in future podcasts, we'll delve into the neuroscience and the psychology of why that is, and help people understand how that works and why those weak ties can be so powerful in attracting opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's huge, because I think that like that breaks down the like hardness of it in my mind, right? This isn't somebody that I have to like be going golfing with every weekend. You know what I mean? It's not somebody that I have to email, you know, once a month. Like it's like there's secrets on how to do it and what's important. You already talked about a couple of those, right? Like likability, you know, being competent at what you do, right? I think this is going to be huge for anybody out there, for anyone that's listening to this. That's like, this is going to like me, who thinks networking can be super hard or super daunting. There's specific things that we're going to tell you about that you can focus on that are easy, you know, or maybe, I don't know. I don't want to say easy because maybe it's not easy for you, but like that are simple, I should say. Right. So focus, just exactly what Jeff was saying about that, what you were saying about that story, right? The guy who focused his money or his resources on the wrong area. He put his windows in when he should have been putting, attic insulation. We're just going to tell you here where to focus that time. So you don't, so when you do something, so when you do like take action, it's in the right place.
Exactly. And I like that you're pointing out that you don't have to be perfect for this stuff to work. Little improvements yield big results.
Yeah. Yep.
And most of the things that I try to focus on are slam dunk, something simple that anybody could do. Because I'll tell you a secret. This is a secret between you and me and the entire internet. So I'm here talking about networks. I don't actually like networking events.
No, not you, Jeff. No.
I've got a degree. It's not severe, but I've got a degree of social anxiety. So the idea of going to the stereotypical networking event where you're just small talking with people, I don't know. I don't like that.
Yeah, that is awkward to me. Some people love it, but I don't know.
Some people thrive on it. So but hopefully that's good news, especially for folks in IT.
Yeah.
If that's what you're picturing, if you're picturing going to these networking events and you're holding your little glass in your hand and you're talking small talk, it isn't necessarily that.
The perfect elevator speech, like that's just anxiety for me too. Like having what to say in the 30 seconds that you get. Right?
Yep. So that's the good news is you don't have to get it perfect. And it isn't necessarily what it might sound like. It can be easier and more simple than that. And I also love that you pointed out again the balance of confidence and likability. This is a 2x2 I show in a lot of speeches that I do. We want to find this perfect balance in people's perceptions of us, of being likable and warm and trustworthy on the y-axis here. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we need to come across as confident and competent and powerful so that they see us as somebody that could do the job. When this gets out of balance, let's say, for example, you come across as very confident and powerful, but you're not likable, or you're cold, and you come across as kind of a jerk.
Then you're Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs or Voldemort.
Yeah.
Wow. These are individuals that can get their way when they have positions of power. They can use their position to get what they want done, but they don't really lead and influence people. So especially for leadership roles, that all they have is their power, but they aren't inspiring people to follow them.
Got it.
But if the pendulum swings too far the other way, where people they really like you, you're very warm, they hang out with you on the weekends, but they don't see you as competent. These are the bless their hearts. These are the Neville Longbottoms. They're not going to offer you the job either, because they don't see that you're going to do a good job. If you're not likable or competent, then nobody likes you. So I don't remember what this guy's name is. It Goyle or Crab?
Crab.
I always used to hang out with Draco Malfoy. He was kind of a doofus, didn't know what he was doing, and he was a jerk. So really all he could expect for his career was to be a little toady for Draco Malfoy.
Yeah, that's so perfect.
But if we can find that perfect balance, the Albus Dumbledore, where people liked him and were attracted to his personality, but obviously came across as confident and competent. If people see you in that way, they're going to hire you. They're going to reach out to you when they have needs and problems that they're trying to solve.
Hashtag be Albus.
Be Albus. So that's just kind of an introduction, almost a preview of what we're going to do. But I wanted to leave with something specific that you could try right now. So if you have an interview coming up, or if you're going to be meeting with somebody for the first time around a career opportunity, here's a specific thing you can try and see if it changes the dynamic, see if it helps in your job search. And this is based off some research from this guy. His name is Robert Cialdini, and I'm probably screwing up his last name just like I do Josh's. But you can search for him on YouTube. He is a professor of psychology and marketing, I believe. Has done tons of research on sales and marketing, on persuasion and persuasion, and helps people to get what they want, which would be awesome for looking for a job. How can we persuade people to hire us? And he has this concept of persuasion, where you're trying to get the person that you're talking to into a mental state favorable to them accepting a proposal. So let me give you a couple of examples. One of the research studies he did involved a group of people. They'd watch an individual coming down the street, and then they'd have an attractive girl come up and talk to him and ask him for directions to St. Martin Street. And then 100 yards later, a different attractive woman would come up to him and say, "You see those guys over there? They stole my cell phone. Would you go and get it back from them for me?" And most of the guys were not willing to risk life and limb for a stranger. Only about 20% were gallant knights and went and got the phone back for the girl. They ran the scenario again. Guy walking down the street, girl comes up and asks him for directions, but this time she asked him for directions to St. Valentine Street. And then 100 yards later, a different girl asks for help getting her phone back. This time, the number of guys that were willing to risk life and limb almost doubled. I think it went up to 38% that were now willing to try to get the phone back. And the only difference between those two scenarios, the first one was asking for directions to St. Martin's, and the second was to St. Valentine's. That word Valentine's put the guys in a more romantic, chivalrous mindset, so that 100 yards later, short time into the future, they were predisposed. They were more open to doing something romantic and chivalrous, all from just that one keyword change. Now, some of his research, he's got tons of it with examples like this. It's kind of borderline creepy or manipulative, how easily our mindset can be changed and make us more susceptible to a suggestion. Yeah. So you can look at some of his videos on YouTube, but a couple things that we can try for our career search. A simple one would be if someone could refer you to the position. If somebody says, Josh is awesome at doing data analytics, you should totally hire him. He's a great worker, and he's amazing at what he does. Now these people are persuaded, they're predisposed to see him in that light. Sometimes some people call this the primacy effect too. If somebody says good things about somebody or bad about somebody, then that sticks. And so now this person is predisposed to think you're awesome. When they meet you, if you come into an interview, they're more likely to see you in that light than they would have otherwise been. Another way that you can do if you don't have a referral is to ask a question like this. What about my background had you interested in having me come in today for an interview? Now the person our brains like to look for hits, not misses. Our brains are going to start scanning for the reasons why this person is a good match for the job. I'm going to start comparing their background and experience, probably from their resume and what they've talked about, with the job description. And then the person's almost selling the individual to themselves instead of them having to do it. All from that question, especially at the beginning of an interview, so that their mind is getting prepped to see you in a more favorable light. Robert Cialdini also found out that there's a difference between asking for an opinion or asking for advice. If you were asking for an opinion of somebody, that tended to have a more divergent reaction from the person, whereas advice brought them together. And so that one might work well if you're out to lunch with somebody, or if you are at a meetup or something like that. You could ask for somebody for their advice. They're feeling good because they're doing something. They're feeling significant. They're feeling competent in being asked this. They're feeling good because they're doing service, and it's going to pull them in and like you a little bit better. So try those two, just as you're normally going through your day, as you're meeting with people, as you're doing interviews. Try some of these questions and see if you can tell if it makes a difference.
Yeah, I think this is huge. I mean, I'm not on the market right now, but I kind of want to try this with just in my relationships with either coworkers or like just people I'm working on projects with, and see, what kind of effect this can make, or even with people that I just meet. I think this is really interesting, and I want to talk about in future podcasts. I actually want to talk about maybe we can get stories back from people who've done this, and tell those stories and see how it worked out. At least I'm going to try to like make my own story so we can obviously share it, but it would be cool. For everyone out there listening, like, do this, write us a little blurb, right? And send it back to us, and we'll talk about it, on one of these podcasts, and we'll analyze, what happened, and maybe even like make recommendations if there's space to do that, right?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. These are cool.
Cool. So that's all I have for today's podcast.
Well, I mean, it's been great. I think this is super helpful. Well, super exciting, at least for me, and hopefully for everybody out there. Thanks for spilling out your knowledge, and can't wait for more.
Excited to do it. So hopefully we'll have another podcast out in about a month's time. And if people have requests, if there's sticking points in your career management or in your job search, then feel free to reach out to us, and then we can include that information too.
Definitely.
All right. Until next time.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
See ya.